Institute. Then we have Raphael Leuner, data scientist at the German Federal Foreign Office. We have Dr. Sharini Yakhtiani, senior officer, technology program at the German Marshall Fund. And we have Norman Schulz, counselor at the coordination staff, AI and digital technologies at the German Foreign Office. And to kick off the conversation today, so we will cover both AI as a topic and as a tool. I would like to first start with the tool. So going to Raphael, who is a data scientist, how do you use AI in the Foreign Office? And I also know that we have data and AI labs in the Foreign Office. So could you maybe share a little bit of your day-to-day work and actually how could AI be used in diplomacy?
Yeah, thanks so much. Maybe to get or to take a step back and answer the question how like someone like me as a data scientist by training ends up in a foreign ministry. I think that's something that at least when we talk to colleagues around the world is still rather rare. We had kind of the lucky coincidence that I think in 2021 the German government decided to start data labs in all of its federal ministries. So in the coming years since then, 2022 or until 2022, kind of 16 data labs have been founded in the German federal government. And I was lucky enough to be part of the one in the German Federal Foreign Office. I was working on AI ever since. We started more on traditional data science, I would say, so tearing down data silos between governments or government institutions in Germany. And of course, ever since ChatGPT and the AI revolution, we have been working mostly on AI tools. And I think the big advantage that we see is that we are in the ministry itself and have very, very short contacts and short paths to our colleagues who are working in Berlin and, of course, all around the world. And I believe in a field that is as fast-moving as AI, that is so important because it doesn't really work to develop these tools in sort of a traditional IT way of doing things, right? We used to have IT development projects that take 2 years, have huge teams, cost a lot of money, but that are just not fast enough to deliver on an AI solution that our colleagues are experiencing themselves in their private lives, right? And some of them even in some official aspects. So what we think is the big advantage that we have, and what we kind of from our experience would always advertise for, is kind of this fast co-creation from within an organization. And I think that is, for a topic like diplomacy, that is the best way of leveraging AI. And I'm happy to go into more detail about that.
Thank you. And I will later ask you more on concrete use cases. But first, I would like to switch to the geopolitical dimension. So Sharini, switching over to you. Taking a step back, AI is now in the political landscape more or less present everywhere, from the Arctic, but also here at the summit. Can you give us a broader picture? How is AI shaping diplomacy or foreign policy in general? What is the debate and where are we at the moment?
Thank you for the question and also the invitation to be here, which is actually also me being in my home country. So you've invited me to my home country, which is an interesting space to be in. But at the broader sort of geopolitical level, AI is shaping not only sort of how we use technology in our strategic communication as countries as well, but as a tool of technology diplomacy. And I don't necessarily think this is particularly new. Throughout the history of international relations and foreign policy, technology has always shaped our foreign policy. So this is the AI revolution, but if we take it back to the Industrial Revolution, if we take it back to the nuclear revolution, if we take it back to the space race, technology has always informed diplomacy, and today it is artificial intelligence. So the technology is new, yes, but the tactics aren't. And today we are here at the AI Summit, and this is also India's way of communicating that it is being a part of a particular technological revolution, which in its previous histories, because of colonial encounters and things, we've been excluded. So in this space, this is a way in which countries from our parts of the world are also trying to kind of claim a space in global technology diplomacy, and this is through AI. And what I would also kind of want to just qualify is what we're seeing in this particular sort of AI race is narratives of competition. So if you look at sort of policy documents coming out of the United States, coming out of China, there's a clear connection between kind of winning an AI race or securing leadership in artificial intelligence. And if you are a country of that size and you are the country that has invented the frontier technology and you've been sort of the first movers in that, specific kind of geopolitical leverage which countries like Germany and India perhaps don't have because we aren't at that frontier capability. But that being said, we're not powerless. We just have a different form of power, expressing power. And that is when the entire middle power conversation comes into play. Both India and Germany can see themselves are, in fact, arguably middle powers. And they have different ways of using their specific leverage on an AI value chain as geopolitical leverage. So for Germany, historically, this has been through rules and through regulation and regulatory power. For India now, it is making a case for applications. So India, and we've seen the fact that the summit has changed from the AI Action Summit, which was the French presidency. Now we're seeing India framing it as the Impact Summit. The slogans of the summit are very much to do with aspirations to deployment or aspirations to impact. So that is really a way in which a middle power like India is also trying to kind of claim its position on the stack. So what you're seeing are the great powers who are competing at the frontier level, and then there are middle powers who are claiming their specific power on the AI value chain in different ways. And I'll stop there for a second.
Thank you very much. And I would like to pick up this sentence that you said, the tech isn't new, but the tech is new, but the tactics aren't. So I have here a diplomat sitting next to me. Would you agree with the statement, and how do you govern AI in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs? And would you say, is this still the right approach to AI?
Oh, well, the short answer would be no. But the topic is so broad that obviously I could give you a 4-hour talk about it. But as a diplomat, as you said, one has to start by saying that the AI Impact Summit here in Delhi, where we are all gathered, showcases the broad variety of AI and the broad picture that AI is now part of everyday's life of all strands of life, that it is a tool in agriculture, in industrial entrepreneurship, in finance, and also in diplomacy and foreign policy. So I find that very interesting what you alluded to, that we have these revolutions all the time, like the Industrial Revolution, like the nuclear revolution after the Second World War, where do the foreign ministries, where do foreign policy comes in? I mean, the technological revolution created front runners like the UK, maybe a little bit like France. But there was a point in time when people saw that only being at the front and adapting the frontier models is not the way to success. But we have to find a way to regulate things, because otherwise people will lose their lives. It's not work safe. It's polluting the environment. Even back then, there was a problem. Nuclear power, the same thing. There was a race in the 50s, and the Cuba crisis beginning at the 60s showed to the world that the nuclear race could not go on like it was. but we need international cooperation to mitigate somehow the risks of it. And I think AI is at a similar point. Maybe it needs a couple of more years when the US and China will actively come together and work out what limitations and regulations we have to put on the technology, because the risks in the end are outweighing possible and potential benefits. And the other great question is, where do the middle powers come in? And this is what India and Germany are talking about. Well, we had the speech of Mark Carney, the Canadian Prime Minister in Davos, where he actively called for a middle power cooperation. I think India is at a wonderful place because you are a digital powerhouse, and you have all the structures and all the workforce to also become an AI powerhouse. I would also make the case that Germany has also some advantages. We have we have infrastructure, we have the money to invest into AI, and we also have industrial data to be a front runner. Even if we didn't succeed at the stage of large language models, maybe when it comes to robotics and embodied AI, Germany will still have a role to play. And obviously, we at the Foreign Office are there to accompany the development of this and to prepare the ground for international cooperation. And I will leave it at that because others.
Thank you, thank you. I would like to turn now to the think tank perspective. The Pranava Institute works at the intersection of emerging technology, public policy, and society from an India-first perspective. How do you see potential room for cooperation between India and Germany? Like we hear now the middle power, both are middle power. I hear a lot at the summit that India is leading in AI adoption. I wouldn't say so maybe in Germany. Maybe my German colleagues would agree or disagree with me, but from your perspective, where do you see cooperation, like potential cooperation? And could you also go a step back and explain to the audience where you see India at the moment, maybe also in light of the AI summit?
Yeah, can you hear me? I think that's a very challenging question to answer. Where is India at? India is at a very interesting place, certainly. India is not lagging behind. India is not yet at a place where we can build frontier models. I think the infrastructure capacity for that is very high. I do see some interesting innovation coming out of India. When we saw the 14 models that Sarvam was released over 14 days, and very, very interesting in the sense that this is innovation which is grounded, contextual. It's coming from the grassroots. You're able to find native language use cases. You're able to do inference at scale at much an order of magnitude cheaper costs. So you're seeing technical innovation which is more context appropriate coming from India. There is, of course, a large workforce which is talented in technology, and there is an upskilling possibility that certainly exists when into AI, and that's a very large pipeline. So I think India is in a very interesting place. India is adopting, India is innovating, India is building applications and use cases, which is a very useful way to think about the technology in its early stages, right? Because there is a huge possibility of investment booms and busts that can come in when you go in a technologically challenging direction without being adaptive. So I think the focus on saying what can we solve is a very useful way to think. I think the Counselor did allude to industrial AI. That's a fantastic use case of cooperation where you and India could possibly, Indo-German cooperation would certainly work out in that sense, because there is industrial expertise, there is automation expertise in Germany, there is industrial data. India has the capability to build technology, build models. So I think if we were to identify and not worry about the race for frontier models, because transformers are not going to be the only technology paradigm out there, and not play the game that
leading powers are, but to really think as middle powers do, as Sharini said, and say that can we focus on sectoral expertise? For example, AI in healthcare is a fantastic opportunity for Indo-German cooperation. There is fantastic data available. India performs 10 times the number of surgeries that other countries do. So there's very interesting data available. Germany has the capacity to invest. Can we cooperate? Germany has expertise in automation. India has people who can build AI models. Can we cooperate? So I think there is possibility for bilateral cooperation that gives an argument that is more than 1+1 in the case of some of these. And I don't think it's a zero-sum game that US is winning or China is winning and we're all left behind. I think the focus on applications is really where differentiator is possible, and that need not come at frontier level costs.
Thank you. And I would like to focus now on this application side, because this is maybe the way to react to big tech or like us as a countries being in the middle between these mentioned countries. Raphael, can I hand over to you to share a little bit how you at the Foreign Office approached? I know that you're working on a negotiation tool, and to what extent can open source also be a solution or might be a solution to the situation where we are at the moment?
Sure. Yeah, so I think it's exactly as you said, that the focus is on application. We have made a consequential, but I think important decision at the beginning that when we are implementing AI, we are focusing for most of what we do on open source technologies, not just the models themselves, but also a lot of the kind of scaffolding and applications around it. So on the one hand, for example, we are reusing applications that, for example, come from one of our state governments who have done kind of a general chat and knowledge base application that we are reusing. But of course, we have specific applications in the Foreign Office, like supporting negotiations. A lot of what diplomats nowadays do is not necessarily sitting in rooms and negotiating face to face, but actually digging through huge piles of documents and trying to understand the positions of other countries, the impact that NGOs, academia, corporations bring into huge negotiation processes. And of course, that's, as we probably all know, is a great chance for artificial intelligence to leverage. I think one important point when we're talking about AI and open source AI in governments is that we have seen a big trend shift, or a shift in the trend last year, where we have seen that a lot of the kind of leading open source AI models, and actually also the ones that have been adopted in many parts of the world, are coming from China nowadays. I think that's an interesting intersection between my position as a technical observer here, where we're looking at the numbers and seeing that really, like, the world is adopting Chinese AI models at the moment, and of course the consequences that might bring for a country like Germany or a country like India on a global scale, if maybe some of our partners are implementing Chinese AI models. So that is something that when it comes to open source, I think it's really important that countries like India, and I think India is at a great position, and I'm super excited to see these new Indian AI models as well, these Indian LLMs, to see if there can be pushes that offer alternatives to these Chinese models.
Thank you. I would like to come back to this impact aspect. Now we heard impact in the public sector, but maybe also reflecting on the summit, AI Impact Summit. What are your thoughts on, like, how will we now continue the conversation regarding impact, regarding really being concrete and not only writing governance formats or governance, I don't know what to call it, frameworks? So how can we make this cooperation very concrete and also continue where we are and face this geopolitical challenge? Shoni? Yeah.
I like that all the geopolitical questions then somehow come back to me. But I don't blame you, because my background is in international relations. So that serves very well this purpose. But I want to kind of also connect your point to what you just said about open source and the China connection. I think we're reaching a stage in international relations in which geopolitics and technology can't be separated. When we are integrating artificial intelligence into our daily life and into our government systems, we can't really separate the security risks that come with it. And I think every country has a unique security situation. For Germany, obviously, there is the concern with Ukraine. With India, we have border security challenges as well. We have territorial disputes that are very significant and have very serious national security implications. So the kind of technology we deploy into our systems, and if it's open source Chinese models or any other form where we perceive, or any country would perceive, a national security risk, that needs to be factored in. And that is why even in our technology decisions, and they have to factor geopolitical risk, which back in the day was not something that, say, companies would have to do, but now every single company that I see has now a position for a geopolitical risk advisor. And that really comes from the fact that we are living in a world in which, if we are using technologies so seriously in our lives, we do need to factor in how those technologies can be weaponized in a particular geopolitical situation. And then that kind of brings me back to also some of the points that were on, you said, where the Foreign Office would like find it helpful for reports to be kind of processed to AI. As a think tank, I'm a little bit hurt, I have to say, because a lot of our work is producing a lot of those reports, but we will force you to read them. We're very persistent at the German Marshall Fund. We will reach out and invite you and make you read them. But jokes aside, it is really, we're aware also that our ability to consume information as well is kind of becoming shorter, but the world is getting more complex. And therefore, we are also kind of preparing, even in the think tanking that we do, or even in the way in which we kind of do our daily jobs, to factor in that there will be an AI in this system, and we kind of need to put that into consideration as well.
And since there will be an AI in the system, we have to make sure that we can trust this AI, and that it's also inclusive, and that it's ethical in a sense, or trustworthy regarding to standards. So how do you and the government react to this? Could you also share more about the Global Digital Compact? What is this panel about, this scientific panel, I think it's called? And how do we make sure that from this governance, it goes to the system, to the AI system? Like, how do we make sure that the systems are aligned with our values?
Well, that's a big question. The best way to align the systems with our values is to develop them ourselves, right? And not just procure them from outside. And I couldn't agree more with the point that you made about the Chinese models, that even if it is open source, even if it runs on our servers, there are still Chinese models. They still have the Chinese ways and the Chinese ways of thinking. Which comes through, maybe not all the time. So using AI to do diplomatic work will not be the way, because then every report will be the same, right? So I hope that Germany will not go the way to write the diplomatic reports now only using AI or summarizing it. But we need our diplomats to insert their innovative thinking. And innovative thinking does not come from AI, because AI is much rather replicating, summarizing. In my understanding, the new ideas still come from the human side, as far as I make it out. Global Digital Compact. Thanks for the question. The Foreign Office was the lead in Germany to negotiate the Global Digital Compact. And obviously you can make a point that this is a UN compact, and the UN system is under immense pressure at the moment. So what does it achieve? And I would make the point that despite all that, it has at least produced two valuable avenues for future cooperation and discussion. Two platforms. The first is the AI panel. I think it's called Independent Scientific International Panel on AI, but I could be wrong with the two I's. It's rather complicated. But it was just yesterday that the UN Secretary General made the point that the AI panel and the second one, the dialogue I will come to in a second, are the two major things where the UN is coming into the picture. And the panel has the task to put our discussions that we have on a global level about AI on a scientific basis. So those are experts, and I'm happy that there are two experts from Germany on the panel. Only the US and China have also two experts. I'm terribly sorry, I don't know how many Indian experts are on the panel, but we'll find that out. True. So they will produce a first report, a summary of where the AI science is now standing in time for the first global dialogue on AI governance, which will happen in July in Geneva, in the margins or back to back with the AI for Good Summit at the International Telecommunications Union. And this dialogue serves the other big purpose of the Global Digital Compact, which is to make the AI discussion inclusive. And so it's also the UN Secretary General, nonetheless, that said that AI cannot be a discussion among the few. The ones that are the front runners, like the US and China, they should not be the one to. They should not be the only one to set the rules, but it has to be a truly inclusive discussion about AI. And up until now, more than 100 countries were not part of this discussion because they were not members of the European Union, not members of the Council of Europe, not members of the G7 or the G20, but they are the ones that will that will use AI, that will adapt AI, and they will also feel the bad results if AI is not doing what it is supposed to do. So it's good that they have a voice at the table, that all UN member states will in July come together and talk about AI on the scientific base that the panel has provided. So that is something that the Global Digital Compact is doing. And of course, we can talk about geopolitics all the time, but I think that's a way forward, and it's to make a point. And I stop here and make a point. Thank you.
Thank you. And Gian, let me turn to you now. What I see sometimes is that we on the one side talk about multilateral cooperation, and it also becomes very concrete also with these panels about including everyone in the discussion. But at the same time, in more or less many nations, we hear sovereign AI or European sovereignty. It's called in our continent. Does it contradict these approaches? Like we have the GDC, inclusive, all together, working together between nations, and on the other side, we all want to have our own. So how do you see it? And where are we, and how can we, as Germany and India, collaborate, even though maybe our frameworks are not the same, or maybe they are the same?
No, I think that's again one of the most difficult questions out there, right? That's the typical classical, IR conversation between realism and and more ideal approach that we're looking at. But I do think there is a value for multilateral engagement. I do think initiatives like the Global Digital Compact are really important. I also think it'll be short-sighted to assume that we are going to have sort of a G2 race and everybody else does not matter. I think that's a framing that is convenient and is not often true. The longer arc of technology looks very different, and the longer arc of adoption also looks different. Middle powers certainly have a say, as Sharini put it. And I think that it is an opportunity for countries like India and Germany, which do share a conviction that it's not going to be only a geopolitical race, but it needs to be inclusive. India frames it as saying that, the global south has to have a voice. We need to have inclusivity. And I think that's one of the mottos of this summit as well. And I think the focus even on AI application, instead of saying making it a frontier model race, is also an important way to frame it such that it becomes a more inclusive dialogue. What is the benefit that we can look at, instead of saying forcing every country into a sovereignty race where billions are poured, and the framing itself can change. And I think the framing of making it inclusive, framing of making it application oriented is something that is important. The idea that Germany and India share, I believe, is that a respect for the rules-based order, a respect for international institutions, and the fact that there is not a zero-sum game in a lot of this. I think the idea that we can work together to bring a larger voice beyond the voice of, 2 countries or 3 countries which are able to compete at the top. I think that's something that is shared. And I think the role of middle powers in bringing a more inclusive conversation is really important. And I think Indo-German cooperation is an opportunity for that, including, for example, the industrial AI that the councillor mentioned, or other opportunities where we can practically create tools, like what Rafael is also talking about, where we can practically create tools that are beneficial and maybe open source. Why should open source models only come from strategically challenging sources? There could be, Indo-German open source models, smaller models, not frontier models, that could be beneficial.
Yeah, I can maybe react to that directly, because I think it is a super critical point. I don't think, some people believe or make us believe that the AI race is already over, or kind of only being decided between the US and China. I don't believe that. I think we're more at the start of what's going to come, and I think we can feel this at the summit. And Gunnar, you asked the question, what comes next? I think next comes building and implementing AI in all these kind of fields that we have. I think we see so many ideas around here and first steps towards that, but we don't really see widespread AI adoption in every field in every kind of part of life. I do think this is going to happen over the next 5 years, and I don't believe for a second that this is only going to be done by the US or China. And yeah, I think that when it comes to middle powers, Germany, India, I think we are going to see much closer collaboration in like smaller groups that don't try to kind of build dependence, right? Making you dependent on us, making us dependent on you, but rather ensure that every country can bring to the table what they are particularly good at, and make the results kind of improve the application of AI for everybody involved. I do think there is a strategy for that, and I think the way forward you have asked is to start with it and to build AI together. I think this summit is a great rally cry for that.
Yeah, please.
Rafael, you led me onto a very interesting trail, so I had to intervene. I think one of the interesting moments, if we think about technology again, in the 1990s was the open source revolution, right? And when you really saw operating systems, which are considered the frontier technology of that time, being built by volunteers at a fraction of the cost, it diffused the race in a certain way, or diffused the dominance in a certain way, but also enabled accessibility across the world. So I think even coming together as middle powers, the power of open source in democratizing and reducing the factor costs of access to AI, it becomes very powerful if we draw the middle.
And now you led me on to a trail as well. I just want to kind of contextualize the sovereignty thing as well. And I do think that when we talk about artificial intelligence, it's not just one application that we see when we use our phones or interact with a particular model, right? It's an entire stack. And the question of sovereignty, or the concerns vis-a-vis the sovereignty debate, is also born out of geopolitics, right? So we don't want to be as a particular country in which suddenly one day we wake up and our technology is not available to us because of something else that happened in another corner of the world. So the sovereignty debate is coming out of geopolitics as well. That being said, we don't need to be beholden to it. I fully agree. And I really like the point on us understanding what our strengths are. I mean, Germany had a high-tech strategy that came out last year. There's also an emphasis on Germany being a space for data as a data hub. And India is trying to do that as well. Germany already has that. One of the things China is really good at actually is industrial data, because they have been collecting this data for a very long time because they automate it quicker than a lot of us. And that's something where we can collectively build competitiveness. So I do think we need to reset some of the inequalities in the AI stack, and that sovereignty, as much as I kind of understand where that comes from, I don't always think that that's the best language to talk about where we are at. I do think we need more sophisticated and nuanced ways of kind of talking about a managed interdependence where I have a certain value on an AI stack. That is my strength, and the likelihood of you weaponizing that makes it very limited. So that's why I have leverage. And I do think leveraging a country's strength on a specific AI stack is a prominent and powerful middle power strategy.
Thank you. These are all beautiful closing remarks, but I would like to open the floor to the audience. Are there any questions? Yes, I will walk around. The guy behind us.
Yeah, hi. I'm Srirang. I'm a student at Ashoka University. I had a question for everyone in the panel. Feel free to answer. The question is, what are some parts of foreign policy research, decision making, and implementation which can be automated by AI, or that will use a significant uses of AI to sort of do your day-to-day tasks?
Maybe I can quickly answer this question. Well, I certainly don't think that AI will make any decision in any time soon. So there's always going to be the human that is making the decision, and it's not going to be me. It's not going to be my boss. It's going to be a collaborative decision by the government and the legislature and all of that. But our job will also not go away. We will use AI to make our job easier, to consume data, to consume, I would like to say, information, but it's nothing else than data. Consuming information easier, quicker, and which in turn will free diplomats to do the other time, which is connecting the dots, which is thinking out innovative ways of cooperation, which is it's basically like drinking coffee and shaking hands. These type traveling to India and learn a lot about the situation here. So AI will free us from tedious tasks of skipping through these very valuable documents written by not only NGOs but also governments, and will make our lives easier, but our work will not go away. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, one more question. The lady maybe in the back. Please also introduce yourself.
Yeah, no problem. Hi, I'm Sanjeevni, and I work in radio journalism in the UK. And my question was for you, Norman. So, specifically you. So, Norman and Sharini, both of you actually. So, when I was doing my master's in journalism, I was studying about how journalists were framing the Russia-Ukraine war. And what I observed was how the narratives were changing based on different outlets. But something when you were talking about how AI is coming into play, do you think AI will help change narratives for the better? And I'm not speaking from journalism point of view, in general, geopolitically. Do you think the narratives will be framed in a way that's unbiased, or how do you think it will help in that?
I can take a stab. I'd be very curious to point a question actually to you, because one of the things I've been really intrigued in my line of work is how AI has been being deployed in the media and newsrooms. And I'd be very interested to have a chat after to learn how you're doing that in terms of methodology. But to your question on AI shaping narratives, I would not let AI shape narratives. I would hope we shape narratives as human beings, depending on sort of what we think and feel and analyze through empirical evidence about the world. And I would be very worried in a world in which we allow AI the space to shape narratives, especially on geopolitics, because then that would depend upon what that particular AI model that is doing the narrative shaping has been trained on. But that being said, I would also see how AI can do the harm in terms of amplifying incorrect narratives or geopolitically challenging narratives, and that's when we know that AI cannot replace society, and it cannot do so. I do think that we are in a world in which if we allow AI to shape narratives, that's not a world we want to live in. But at the same time, if it is a world in which that can happen, we need to find the right mitigation strategies to do that. One thing that I know India is doing, Sham, we talked about it earlier, which is these bias detection technologies that are critical. AI is a technology that, on one hand, we do need strong regulation to make sure that we can prevent the harms from doing what they can. But at the same time, we need also technological tools to deal with some of those harms and push a democratic innovation as well in AI for exactly these harms. And I'll stop there.
Just one sentence. If you let AI write the newspapers, they are becoming incredibly dull because it's going to be repetitive all the time. But I agree with your point about bias. This is something that we all have to challenge and to face. And AI is helping us. That's a good thing. AI is not only a risk; it's also the opportunity, helping us detect bias and then contravene it. Thank you.
And maybe just one sentence I want to add, because I found your point so important. I don't see any risk that AI is going to shape the narratives itself somehow, but of course it's an incredible tool for actors trying to shape narratives. And we have seen this on so many fronts already. We have colleagues in the Foreign Office who are actually monitoring this and seeing that, it's, for example, used to amplify certain messages across social media, increasingly now across, faked websites that with the help of AI you can pull up in seconds, and suddenly you don't have one of them or two of them, but you have thousands of them. And that is something that AI is already used quite heavily as a tool of certain actors who are trying to influence geopolitical discussions in exactly that way.
No, sorry, we are running out of time, but I'm sure that the speakers stay here a little bit. So thank you for your for listening to our panel discussion. Maybe a big applause to our panelists. And in case you have questions, they will be around here, so you can ask them directly. Thank you.
What is the next technology to get?